Hey everyone, welcome back to Dan's Chess Lounge. In round number 9, we have the two Russians facing off against each other, Sergey Karjakin against Vladimir Kramnik. Now the question is, how is Vladimir going to bounce back after his almost 100 move game yesterday against Alexander Grischuk that he blew and lost? He had many chances yesterday to pull out a victory. So the question is, how is he going to rebound? Let's see. Karjakin was white. Started out c4, the English opening, e6, knight c3, d5, d4. This is transposing into a queen's gambit declined. Knight f6. Now this is the same exact opening that Kramnik played yesterday against Grischuk. These guys are following the same exact move order. Now it varies. Yesterday, Grischuk played knight f3 here, but today, Karjakin plays c takes d. Now this turns into the exchange variation of the queen's gambit decline. So then he takes with the knight takes d here, and that's usually the move order now is e4, which hits the knight, and then the knight captures on c3. And that's exactly what happens here in this game. Now, as you notice, white has this nice classical center here with the two pawns on D and E. And he also has another pawn here to reinforce the center. So white has this very nice center that he's going to be playing around. And then black is going to try to break up this center with moves like c5 and knight c6, things like that, trying to break up the center. c5, here we go. Now you have rook b1. Rook b1 hits the b7 square, but more importantly, kind of makes it hard for this bishop here on c8 to develop to a nice square. So with it being blocked in already on e6, chances are that Kramnik is going to at some point play b6 and then fianchetto the bishop to either a6 or b7. Bishop e7, knight f3, good developing moves. Castle, good fundamental moves here. Now, at this point here, Karjakin played a novelty. This is not in the database. h4 here on move number 9. I think maybe he was inspired by Kramnik pulling out all of his novelties in this tournament, that he wanted to play a novelty as well. So he played 9h4 here. So the thing is, you have to ask yourself in your own games, in these games here that you watch by the professionals, if it's a move that you have not seen before, or if you're unfamiliar with the move, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best move to play. Because in this position, h4 is not the best move actually. When I put it on the engine gave a advantage right away to black after this move here. So you have to ask yourself, what's the idea behind h4? Well, we think that the pawn is going to storm the king side, black's king side, and try to create some weaknesses along the king side that Karjakin can then exploit later. He can create some weaknesses and some holes and some things like that in the black king side. The question is his own king side going to be too exposed? So going back here one move, the typical moves to play here is bishop c4, or you can play bishop e3, or even bishop e2. But Karjakin played h4, novelty. So now you have c takes d. Kramnik thought for a while, but then he decided to continue with his plan of attacking the center. So he played c takes d, knight c6. Again, developing his piece, and also attacking the center. H5. Karjakin is continuing with his plan of trying to disrupt Black's kingside. F5 here. Now this is a very aggressive move here. It weakens Kramnik's kingside. He's going to be exposed here, but it's going to give him some pluses and some pros as well. Now he's also striking the center from both sides. E takes F, and now how would you recapture the pawn here? Would you just go ahead and take back E takes F? Well, Kramnik decided to play Queen A5 check. This is the best way to recapture the pawn. And then after the bishop blocks, he picks off the pawn there with the queen. So if we stop for a minute and evaluate the position, Kramnik's position is very dynamic. He has some holes here. He has, 3 different pawn islands here. But those holes there gives his pieces diagonals and files that he can play on. His bishop has nice scope here. His rook is occupying the semi-open file here. He's got his queen out a little early in the game, but since it's out, you can't take away the fact that it's active. He has a very active queen. The only pieces that's really not in the game yet is this bishop and the rook here. And the rook is really based on the bishop. Once the bishop gets free, then the rook can get free. So Kramnik should probably decide on what he's going to do about freeing his light square bishop here very soon. You have bishop c3, a6. This stops the pawn from moving any further. Bishop d3 hits the queen. Queen g4 attacks the undefended pawn on g2. King f1. And this is the best place for the king to be. It would not be a good idea for the king to castle, because if the king castled, then he would just lose this pawn here. So this is the safest that the white king can get in this position. E5. This releases the light square bishop now along this diagonal, and again it continues with Black's plan of attacking the center. E5 here hits the knight on c6, and now you have e4, so you have a double-edged attack here. White is attacking the knight on c6, Black is forking the knight and the bishop there. So what happens next? You have pawn captures knight, pawn captures knight, and pawn captures pawn. Now White's king is majorly exposed over here. So you have 2 ways to capture back. You have either rook captures pawn, queen captures pawn, or you can play. Those are the main 2 options there. Queen takes the pawn here is the best move here. This is what Kramnik should have played. This was the correct move to play. But there are some drawbacks with it. If the queen captures, then the queens will be traded and taken off the board. And then you're going to go into an endgame, and the position is going to be relatively drawish. And Kramnik is playing very aggressively. His last few games in this tournament, actually, even from the beginning of the tournament, Kramnik has been playing very, very aggressively. So he did not want to go down this route. He did not want to go into a drawish type of game. And I give him credit for that, because, he's already said that this is probably going to be his last candidates tournament. So he wants to go out swinging. This line here would go queen takes, rook takes, which is hitting the bishop. So then the king steps up, to protect. Rook takes the bishop here because you can't let white play c takes b7 here, forking the bishop and rook. So then you have pawn takes, and at the end of this, Kramnik would have been down the exchange, but he would have the bishop pair, and the position is very open, which is good for bishops. So he would have been able to hold this. This would have been a drawish position for him. Going back to what happened in the game here, so since I already said that he didn't play queen takes pawn, that means he played rook takes pawn here. And this is actually a blunder. This here loses the game, actually. But Karjakin did not find the correct continuation. Apparently, he played relatively fast at this point here. He saw a line that he liked and went right for it. But there was a win in this position here. And let me show you what the win is. If he would have played c takes b here, forking the two pieces, then the bishop would recapture. But now you have queen b3 check. That forks the bishop and the king. King moves out the way. Now you have queen takes bishop, which also hits the rook there on a8. Rook drops back to f8 to defend and protect. And now he swaps off that bishop on e7 as well. So at the end of this variation, it would be game over. It would be lights out for black because white would be up 2 whole bishops. So materially, it's just game over. But Karjakin did not find that variation there. Instead, he played bishop e2. He played bishop e2 here. And it wins the rook here right away because the rook is pinned to the queen there on g4. So he's going to win a rook. So he saw this line and he went right for it. So you have rook takes f2. Kramnik figures if he's going to give him the rook, then he might as well at least get a pawn for it. King takes. Now you have bishop c5 check. King f1. Queen f4 check. So at this point here, I'm starting to think that, okay, maybe Kramnik's attack is strong enough. You know, he gave up an entire rook. He did not do that for no reason at all. He had something in mind going into this line here. So his attack is looking pretty dangerous because the white king does not have any cover, any pawn cover at all. Bishop f3, trying to cover his king, and he was in check. Now you have b takes c, finally capturing that dangerous pawn that was threatening to fork the pieces there on b7, and that allows black to get this bishop a6 in, and then that would hit the king there, and then white is going to be in some trouble here. He might be walking right into a mating net. So bishop e1 had to be played here. This stops the mating net that white was walking into, because the bishop now is going to come back and add some defense to the white's position and add some cover, basically. And so now the king is going to be able to hide behind white's bishops. So instead, Kramnik goes out the other way with bishop e6. And he's finally got his bishop into the game on move number 24. So that's taking a very, very long time to develop one of your most active and dynamic pieces. That's a very slow development, especially considering that he's going for an all-out attack. He needed to have his bishop in the game a lot faster than move number 24. Bishop h4. The idea behind this is that now the king can step into the g2 square, and then After that, the bishop can play to g3 here and provide some cover for the king. Rook f8, threatening to win the bishop on f3. The king goes to g2. King h8, tucking his king away to the corner. Rook c1 now. Karjakin is going to start picking at Kramnik's pieces. So you have rook c1 attacking the bishop. Rook f5 protects it. Rook c3, a rook lift. I just love a good rook lift. It can be serve dual roles. It can be a defensive move and an attacking move at the same time. Just like in this situation here. The rook is attacking the bishop, but it's also defending the position over here, the king side over here. A rook lift, a good rook lift is the best move in chess, in my opinion. But I'm a little biased. I love rook lifts. Rook d5. And then at this point here, Kramnik is offering his other rook. He's offering the exchange of his other rook here, his last rook, because he wants to get his light square bishop into the attack. And Karjakin calculated the position and he accepted. He said, all right, you know what? If you're going to offer me your rook, I'm going to take it. And he looked at Kramnik and he said, prove it. Now, he didn't really look at him and say prove it during the game, but that's what mentally was going on. He said prove it. Bishop takes d5, check. Rook f3. And see, there you go with the rook lift there. Now the rook was able to slide over to f3, and now it's playing a defensive role here, defending the position. And don't forget, Karjakin is up a whole entire rook here, so he can afford to give back some material at some point if he needs to. Queen g4 check, bishop g3, bishop d6, and rook h3. Wow, another rook lift. This time it's a defensive rook lift. And Karjakin makes use of his extra piece. He has the extra rook. So the question is, how is black going to break through here? He doesn't want to just exchange pieces because he's down material. That wouldn't make sense. So how is he going to break excuse me. How is he going to break through? Bishop e7, queen e2, bishop e4, and queen f2. And let's just stop here and evaluate the position. Karjakin has built a literal fort around his king. His king is surrounded by his pieces. This is incredible. He actually built a fort. So how is black going to break through? Is black going to be able to break through? Well, we'll see what happens next. a5, a4, c5. So at this point here, black can't make any progress with his pieces, with his minor and major pieces here. So he's pushing the pawn to see if he can make any progress with this pawn here. So you have rook h1, bishop f6, all lining up to try to get this pawn through because that's his last hope. Rook e1. Now the bishop goes to c6, hits this pawn here and gets out of the way of being captured. Rook e3. And this here sets up the idea of if this pawn ever does get to c3, then once white moves his king out the way, then he'll be able to snap this pawn off. And like I said, he doesn't care about dropping an exchange because he's already up a full piece. So, and the king wouldn't necessarily go here. The king may go here or here. So, c4. But now white has threats of his own. He wants to play rook e8. He's trying to eliminate Kramnik's pieces, even if it means that he's going to be losing in exchange, because he's up a whole entire rook, so he can afford to give back some material if that means he's going to go into a winning endgame. Queen h5, that covers that e8 square. Queen c4 hits the bishop. So then when the bishop moves, excuse me, let's go back one move. The queen captured the pawn there on c4, and he also hits the bishop. Bishop d7, and now you have rook d3 here, and Kramnik resigned at this point because he's down too much material. He's down an entire rook, and he's also down an exchange as well. White still has both of his rooks. And then Karjakin just made the time control one move ago, so he could sit back and think for a while and really pick apart Vladimir Kramnik in the remaining position here. He could take his time and just basically make him suffer. It would be a slow death. So Kramnik decided against that. He just decided to throw in the towel now. So Kramnik had a great start. You know, he came out with that novelty in game number 3, I believe, against Iranian, where he played that novelty 7 rook g8. And he started out very well, but he's been stumbling coming down the stretch. He has not been playing his best chess. It hasn't been very Kramnik-like chess as well. It's been very forced and very, very aggressive. Not usually Kramnik style. But this is a great win for Sergey Karjakin. Moves him up in the standings. Everyone else drew today. So Fabiano was pressing Ding Liren, but he wasn't able to pull off the victory. So at the end of the day, Fabiano carries on his half-point lead going into round 10. Tomorrow is a rest day, so the players get the day off. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in round 10.